when I go to new customers or new project managers or new teams, I always make it clear to them that the way that I become a success in the industry that I'm in is by making them look like superstars. And usually when people realize that I'm there for them and to make them seem great, it comes a lot easier actually. And it's also true, like I'm a hero in my company if I can make them heroes in their companies. If I can make people succeed, that's my job done, you know.
Welcome back to the Exploring Podcast. My name is Teja. I am so grateful to see you right here, tuning in back into the conversation to learn, to execute, and to exploit for a better purpose. And I love inviting the incredible personalities to the show who could help us to become the better version of ourselves, who could help us to amplify the positivity, and who could even help us to expand our mind and leverage the technology into the life or business, or even more importantly about the life, right? And even when it comes to the code, a matter of any programming language, refactoring is a fact of life, right? And when it comes to software development, all code is imperfect and refactoring is a systematic process you could use to improve the quality of the code base, right? And today's guest is going to help us to know more about that, as you already know, none other than Clausen. Before we move ahead, a huge shout out to Sandag Education for sponsoring this episode. Join over 500,000 learners across the world. You can learn machine learning, AI, and big data just for $25 a month. All you need is some prior programming or scripting experience with a high school level math. With a lot of hands-on activities and exercises, you can practice whatever you have learned. Visit sandag-education.com and sign up for a free trial course to start your journey towards a lucrative and rewarding career in the hardest technology. That's sandag-education.com. Now, on to the ad-free show. Kristen works as a technical agile coach, teaching teams how to properly refactor their code, and previously worked as a software engineer on the Coccinella semantic patching project, an automated refactoring tool. And also, he holds an MSc in computer science and 5 years of experience in teaching all about software quality at the university level. On top of all of that, he's the author of the book 5 Lines of Code on teaching clear and actionable rules that anyone can apply to achieve to improve the quality of the code base. And Kristen is the one who quotes his mentor words: the key to being consistently brilliant is hard work every day. And please help me to welcome Kristen Clausen. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Teja. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So, it's been quite a bit of time that I've been following your work, and that made me really fascinated to have you on the show. So let me start with my curious question, right? You titled the book like 5 Lines of Code, which actually talks a lot about quality of the code, right? And your style, and moreover about refactoring, right? But what's the reason behind the name? Like, why is that like 5 Lines of Code? Like, what made you to choose that?
So 5 Lines of Code is the first rule that's introduced in the book. It's the fundamental rule. And the way I came about that was I needed to find a way to force people to learn about refactoring and to force people to start thinking. I needed to find a sweet spot in method length that it was not trivial to obtain, but it forced you to actually be creative and to learn. But it also shouldn't be too cumbersome or too unfeasible to do in like a real project setting. So 5 lines seemed to hit the spot where you can still actually express something meaningful in 5 lines fairly easily. But also, if you have a long if-else chain, you're going to run into trouble, right? You're going to need to learn how to deal with if-else chains and how to extract things, and that sort of motivates a lot of the later things in the book.
So, it went up in that way, and that's beautifully said. And also, when we look into your careers and also all of your journey of becoming an agile coach now, so in the last time, but I just noticed a common thing, the most powerful part of your whole journey till now, the thing that I noticed, and it's more about I found that attachment towards teaching, coaching, and letting others learn from your work, blogging, and everything, right? So you have been to software engineering, consulting, and then to teaching back, right? Now, and you now choose to be a part of Code as also a teaching, right? As an agile coach. And then why back again to teaching? So what's the attachment with teaching for you?
So I actually loved teaching already when I was at university. I took as many teaching assistant positions as I could get. And at some point, I didn't get any because there were none left, or I didn't fit the qualifications or something. And I was so distraught by that I actually started my own student organization where all the students at university could come, and there would be a 2-hour talk every Friday. That was my promise. Every Friday there would be someone talking about something, and whomever wanted to do it could just could come and host a talk. And if there was no one else, then I would just come up with something. And because computer scientists are a little bit timid, I had to host the first 60 myself, 60 weeks in a row pretty much. And that was tough, but I learned so much from that. And I just loved sharing things with other people and discussing with them and like growing together and creating this community where we just was focused on being as good as we could, right? And we were having fun together, and it was a great thing. It's and I when that was running well, I joked about if I could make this my career, I definitely would, right? Just learning new stuff all the time and sharing it with people and inspiring people and having fun together with knowledge. And I think actually where I've gotten now is very close to that. I get to talk to a lot of people. I get to inspire a lot of people and learn new technologies and help people learn about refactoring or architecture or whatever. And I think it's just, I love making people's work a little bit more fun and a little bit more easy, right? If I can make people succeed, that's my job done, you know.
That's beautifully said. But when you mentioned about, you used to have a consistent meetups where you used to call all of your fellow mates or seniors or juniors, everyone out there, and letting them have a conversation with you and letting them learn from you, right? When you usually have such a kind of initiatives like very rare in colleges or universities or everywhere, but I want to know, like, how do you used to inspire them? Like, if there are people who are actually listening to you and coming for you, for your way of teaching, they usually need to trust you, right? They need to believe in your teachings. They need to believe in your strategies and also all of your work, right? So how do you used to inspire them? Like, how do you used to make them be with you?
So when I go to new customers or new project managers or new teams, I always make it clear to them that the way that I become a success in the industry that I'm in is by making them look like superstars. And usually when people realize that I'm there for them and to make them seem great, it comes a lot easier actually. And it's also true, like I'm a hero in my company if I can make them heroes in their companies.
But, I wanted to take you a bit backward of your life, getting into those days where you literally made them to come with you, right? So are there any ways that you used to follow that you if you wanted to lead them, like when you say that you are going to help them, you're actually leading them and serving them, right? So do you used to find or follow any strategies to actually lead them or made them to be with you?
I have like a few very simple guidelines I follow when I do something like that. It has to be open and public, and it has to be inclusive of everybody who wants to join. I've always had the opinion that anyone in our community should be super respectful of anyone new, and anyone who was curious, we just encouraged that as much as possible. And we would the first thing one of the first things we talked about was how would we discuss with each other, how would we converse. And how do we put ourselves in other people's shoes and start asking questions instead of just trying to impose our opinion onto those. And that helped a lot of people. It was very easy to come and to be accepted into this group. Like there was no entry requirements or no nothing. And then consistency, you know. It's the same with streaming and with blogging and with the community back then. If people have to think, they're not gonna do it, right? It's too hard. You have to make it as easy and as seamless as possible for people. So just being very consistent and being very open-minded to new people and their opinions. Of course, we had a few people who were just trying to come there and show off and like to be very mean to our presenters, and they were very quickly shut down because we needed to have an open and a very safe space where people could just talk about anything. And not everything that I talked about I was an expert in, far from it. I just looked up some tutorials or did something concrete, had some code, and were like, hey guys, this is pretty cute. Do you want to see it? And, you know, a lot of people just were there for their social thing also, right? Just have something to talk about with people, and it was super nice.
Awesome. I mean, that's beautifully said. And, when you mentioned about the consistency, right? This is one of the most known and also really challenging things for the people out there, right? Being consistent is the toughest job not only for everyone other, it's specifically for me. It's one of the biggest lessons that I ever learned, and I'm trying to be consistent on my work. And I can't ever say that I'm consistent. Till now, I can't fully say that I'm consistent because I miss some day. I couldn't make it further for another day, right? So, and I'm actually feeling the confidence in you because you've been saying about being consistent from the university's class and being various of your whole journey. So I think you nailed it and you finally made it, right? So what's the principles that you actually follow, or what's the things that you actually recommend for someone who is doing something, wanted to be consistent? Like what do you recommend for them? Like what's your advice for them?
That's a tough one. I also say to my colleagues and to my friends that the hardest thing is not the doing, it's the doing it on a schedule and doing it again and again and again, because you're not going to be on your A game all the time. You're not going to love your job every day, no matter what the job is. It may be the greatest job in the world, but sometimes it's just you have an off day and that's fine. I don't know if I have any good advice for being consistent. I set up schedules. I set up as many schedules as I can, and I try to keep everything in sort of these boxes. And I know on Tuesday evenings I have to stream, and on like all of these things, and I set up alerts and reminders for myself. And then I just have to, push myself to do it every single time. And most times it's super fun, and I love doing it. Once I get started, it's the starting, right? It's the opening the file. It's the starting the thing and just hitting record or whatever it is and just getting it done. That's the hardest step, is the starting.
Yeah, and also in my case, in my own experience, when I tried doing the same way as you just said, you just need to hit the record button and boom, you're on the go, right? You just need to start blogging, write the first para, and boom, you're on the go. But for me, writing that initial thing, and not only for me, for a lot of my people and my friends and a lot of other people who are with me, also has a similar problem. Like what happens when we try actually getting into such a way. So there are two kind of voices in our mind. Like one is so uplifting, and the one is so encouraging, and the one is so pushing you hard to move forward with that so consistentness, right? But there is a other voice which actually pulls you down, which actually keeps you dragging down. Okay, you've been doing a lot of work for the past 7 days. It's time for a break. But when we move ahead, these are the two voices which will be always with us, right? So how do you tackle them? Like, do you listen to which voice the most? I think you listen to the first one than the other. But what sort of strategies that you follow that made you to be on your own track?
So I very much try to, as you mentioned, I live by my mentor's words, which is the key to being consistently brilliant is hard work every day. And so I try to do something every day, even on the days that I'm not feeling on top, I do something. I just need to make sure that I did some progress and a little bit of improvement on whatever it is that I'm doing every time. I also try to be very careful about not overloading myself, because I have a tendency, like many I think, to start a million things, right? Just start new projects. This is exciting. I want to learn this technology. I want to learn this new language. I want to do all these things. And I try very hard to keep that down. This year, my New Year's resolution was to start a hobby board, I think I called it, where I limit myself on what I'm allowed to work on. I have only 3 things that I can work on right now. And then my queue of things that I'm waiting with is currently 31 items, I think, ranging in everything from cooking to chess. And I try to focus on the things that I actually have decided, like in a sort of a strategic long-term way, that this is going to benefit me the most if I focus on these things. And then some things just have to wait. And it's the same when I do projects. I try to select, to scope it as small as possible so that I can quickly get a success and then build upon that, instead of trying to, do all these big, huge things. Just do a little thing well, very well.
Yeah. That totally makes a lot of sense. And I could actually, introspect and actually think of the same thing. And one of the place where I actually find a bit difficult, and I feel the most as well, is when we try to be so much consistent on a specific work, right? But what eventually happens is that there's something comes in between. Like when I say between, I don't want to call them distractions, but maybe another where literally attracts you so much. Maybe you're working on a specific project, and somewhere part of the world another project comes in, and you literally wanted to jump in, and you literally wanted to that attracts the most. So are there any kind of experience with you? So have you ever tried breaking them and being so consistent? Because we have a lot of things and something comes in between, it attracts us so much, and we shift back and we lose the consistency and we convince ourselves that I'm doing a better work than the rest, right?
Yeah, I have that a lot. I've started, I don't know how many books by now, probably 7 books throughout my life, and only one has gotten to the stage of contacting a publisher, right? And starting to really work on it. And this one is going to be finished as opposed to the other ones. And so I don't even know how many projects I've started with coding, so how many games I wanted to make, or how many tools that I thought, oh, this will save the world from something, right? And it never really sticks until now when I made the decision, when I made the switch to, instead of focusing on what I wanted to do, focus on not doing all of the other things. Right? It's Scott Hanselman has a great talk that's called "It's not what you read, it's what you ignore." That's going to determine, what's going to happen, and I think it's awesome, and yeah, that's what I'm trying to do now. It's not do all of the things that I also would like to do.
Awesome. I mean, it went so good. But in the mean way, like when we speak about your writings and your blogs and all of your work, and in specific with the 5 lines of code, you speak a lot about quality code, a good code, and a bad code, right? But if I speak about a good code and a bad code, it kind of feels like a good person and a bad person, right? And when you just say about a bad person, we give some sort of a reasons, because that is the reason why I term the person as a bad, and this is the reason that I term the person as good, right? But if you get a chance to explain that in such a manner, like how do you explain a bad code to any other out there? Because I don't want to know about the good code, because people who know the bad code can able to actually differentiate between what a good code is, right?
So are you asking like what are characteristics of bad code?
Yeah, in a different way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing is, what I've sort of seen a lot when I've visited teams is that you can feel on the developers whether what the quality of their code base is, and that's sort of interesting because it's becoming. I started out being a pure developer, right? I loved coding and I hated all of the rest of the stuff. I only wanted to spend time in my editor typing characters, right? I thought that was great, and that was paradise for me. But once I've matured a bit and seen a lot of teams in the industry, I've noticed how you can feel on the people, how their quality of their code is based on how do they feel on the weekends? How do they feel when they have time off? Are they stressed? Are they still carrying that load with them? When I ask them a question, do they start with a sigh? Stuff like that sort of suggests to me that they're not able to accomplish what they expect of themselves or what they wanted to do. And that's usually, or in a lot of cases at least, there's probably some selection bias because it's me, but what I'm finding a lot of the time is that it's because their architecture does not support them in the way that makes sense, or because they're in a world where they're project focused instead of product focused. That also sort of bleeds through into the software, and that means that some parts cannot just not be maintained because there's no longer funding. And whenever you have to work with that, you have the dread feeling in your whole body. It's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to work and work on this stupid big legacy system, right? And so really what I want to do is just, if my book can help a few people just get a little bit more happy, let their work be their work and not carry it with them in their spare time. I mean, that's success from my point of view. That would be awesome. And it's so interesting that it's become more of a people craft than a coding craft. Like, if you want to be a very good developer, look at the other developers, right? How does the team deliver? How does the team work? How do I help the team? And more so than the code.
Awesome. I mean, that's literally a deep meaning inside of all your words. And I know that you've been teaching and you've been fascinated about this for quite a long time. When we try teaching about someone about something, we, unintentionally and subconsciously, we create a pattern, right? We genuinely create a pattern, trying out to reach the other's brain in a vivid and a crisp and a easy way, right? You want to try reaching their brains with ease and fun, right? So that they could get even more easier. So that's where I found your videos on creating games, 2D games, to explain all of that. And that's a lot of fun, right? But I'm kind of curious to know, what is your thought process behind teaching anything about anything to any other?
So it needs to. So I think people go through a process when they're learning. The first stage is imitation, right? They just need to look at you doing something and then do the exact same thing, no variation at all. Then you have to force them to do it again, but without having explicitly just shown them. So they have to do something 2 times because the first time just verifies that they've understood what it is you want them to do. The second time sort of reinforces in their brain, okay, this is something that I can actually do now because I did it once. And then they don't feel comfortable with it, they don't feel great about it, but they can do it, right? They can execute the same thing again. And then they can start to sort of internalize this knowledge and start getting confidence in, okay, I can do this thing. And once they have this solid base kind of thing, they can start doing variations. You can give them sort of curveballs and sort of, this doesn't look like the same thing, but it's actually the same thing and stuff like that. And so I try to structure my teaching in all ways of life around that thing where if I can just show you something and have you do that exact thing, then you'll start building confidence in yourself that you can do that thing on your own. And that means also reducing as much as possible the initial investment that you need to do. And that's why I'm writing the book in the way that I am, where I have rules that are very, very easy to grasp. So you don't have to sit down and spend hours studying, what does this actually mean? Like, is this good? Is this bad? Where there's judgment call, there is this weird thing that takes time, and that's just fine. And I love code smells, right? But they don't come from one day to the next. They come over a long time, over looking at it, over your eyes getting used to looking at that sort of thing. So what I wanted to do is just get you a way to look at that sort of code without having that understanding yet, and then building it while you're still doing something useful.
Yeah. And I got a bit striked about it in the same way. Like when we're doing all of that, again, in the way of consistency, right? We keep ourselves consistent and take it forward. When we actually, try doing it, there is another thing, there's like a paradox of perfection, right? We try to be so much about getting perfect, and getting about a lot of perfection is one of the most challenging things, and also one of the most dangerous things to let others give away. Right? So, I do, and I fail varies a lot of times, and like those failures are quite high in the number of times than the failures. Like if you just make a comparison, the number of times I did it well and the number of times I did it perfectly, the number of times I did is higher than the number of times I did so perfectly, right? So, but that literally makes a lot of people to give up. That is the most concerning point that we need to talk about. So I want to know your view on, dealing with perfection. Is that okay? Like we've been so much consistent about a lot of things. We've been doing it for days, months, years, and still we wanted to have perfection every single day, right? So what's your view on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really battling that every single time I do anything. Every time I write a blog post, I'm like, okay, I have to sit down a time box for this or something like that to make sure that I don't go into that spiral of wanting perfection. So my goalpost, I keep reminding myself because it's very hard to keep that, but it should be useful. If it's just useful for some, then it's fine. It should just get it out there, get it to the people who it's useful for. When 1 year ago, I had a discussion with one of my mentors, and he was saying, hey, Christian, what are you doing in your spare time? And I'm like, I'm writing this book. And it wasn't really a thing back then. It was just something I'd been working on for a few years. And he was like, oh, where can I buy it? Where can I read it? And I'm like, you can't read it. It's on my hard drive. I'm working on it. He's like, well, who is it helping on your hard drive? Like, how is it making the world better there? And that's just such a good point. And that's what ultimately pushed me to, get it into the world. And I was like, yeah, he's right, actually. Just this is already useful to some, right? It's not perfect. It's definitely not. And I might have missed something in there that will be discovered years from now. And I'll feel it will be super uncomfortable for me personally, but I still think it's useful, right? I still think that's the goalpost that I'm trying to do, because it's better to have something out there that's useful than to have something that's perfect or near perfect and just sitting in your hard drive, right? Not helping anyone.
Absolutely. I mean, that literally blew my mind. Like, it literally made me to think even more deeper that actually, sharing and, cloud thinking, where we actually spread our work to the people that we believe in, that we trust in, and others are helping us to make it more better. And I feel that's what perfection is, right? See, when we say perfect, it's nothing, it's more over what I think is that we think about what others think about it, right? If the other people think about this is good, and the other people think about this is better, and the other one think about it's perfect, then that's what we term like a perfect, right? Because their views need to be included, and they need to be concise, they need to be, compromised with our work, right? They need to be do that. So what if they helped that and they made it so perfect, and that's what the perfect mean, right? So I mean, your mentor words literally, blew my mind as well, not only yours. So taking in a similar way, not only into the perfection and the consistency work that we be doing for months, years, and everything. What about code? Like, I feel no matter what else I do in my work or code, it always feels that I'm not optimized, right? And I believe most of the programmers do believe the same, right? And striving for optimization and fixing them up really takes a lot of time. And I want to know, is there any good go-to source so that you could quickly know whether the code is, really optimized, or you need to strive more ahead for optimization? And optimizing code is one of the challenging things I personally
I actually have a section in the chapter 10 that's coming up and should be coming out soon, that's called how to overcome the fear of writing imperfect code. And because I think it's very, very prominent in our industry, and a lot of people, there are so many ways that code can be wrong, right? It can be unoptimized, it can be badly structured or badly refactored, it can be complicated, hard to read, it can be not the right algorithm, or it can be silly, it can be filled with bugs. There are many, many ways to fail when writing code. And I think the fact that we learn that from, like when we learn programming, a lot of focus is put on all of the ways it can go wrong. And it creates this fear of just writing anything or doing anything. And in some cases, I think it's even, there's also a lot of talk about imposter syndrome, right? Where you're scared of being exposed as just pretending to be a developer. And so many people feel that. I feel like that's the norm rather than the exception, right? We're all just imposters. And again, I think Scott Hanselman also just started out by one of his talks by saying, I'm a phony. I've reconciled with that. That's fine. So now, all the pressure's gone. I've just admitted it up front, right? And obviously it's sort of a joke, but I also think it's helpful to just say, it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. That's not the important factor. I like to use the metric for code that it should optimize for developer life. And that means within the specifications you have, you might have some requirements for performance. You might have some requirements for the architecture or anything. But within that, you should optimize for the fastest you can move on to the next task, because that maximizes how much you get to practice. It maximizes, just the fact of writing code a lot. It helps you write better and better code over time. And that sort of, hopefully, that will sort of combat that feeling of fear of like, what if I don't do the right thing? Just, it doesn't matter, do something. And embrace that continuous improvement mentality that just means, I was just saying to you before we hit record that like, when I stream, I just try to do something a little bit better in between each stream. I make a tiny change, and then, that helps me get better and better over time. And that means that by the end, I should be hopefully super good at all these things. That's also why I have a million hobbies, because then I can start improving early and do it for the rest of my life, hopefully.
Wow, that's really beautifully said. Like, when you spoke about that literally strike an idea, a powerful idea that I ever learned from Atomic Habits. It's from James Clear, the author of the amazing book Atomic Habits, which he speaks about the 1% rule, right? You improve 1% a day, as you said about you before you hit the record, you improve a better quality, right? And at the end of the day, you become more better. At the end of the year, you become amazing, right? So it literally made me to think of this 1% rule, and it feels so good that you are actually applying it on every single day. Like, there is a lot of people, and including me, that I couldn't actually make it so far, though, because consistency is the one which actually a key for everything that you've been doing for years. Now, one other thing about when we speak about being consistent and being productive, and also it takes a lot of things, right? It takes self-discipline, self-organization, and keeping your mind clear first and about anything. You don't need to control your brain. You need to organize it, right? You need to align it to something so that you could be on its own way, so that it could be more faster. But my question is that in order to do all of this, I personally feel that winning the morning is so much important. Like, the moment you wake up, you need to wake up with a huge energy that you would love to work on the things that you wanted to, and your goals and your, organizing yourself and hitting up the number one priority and everything, right? For all of that, for any of that you wanted to achieve in a single day, I feel the winning of the morning is so much important, right? Because that feel and energy will strive you for the entire day. And that's what you call productivity, right? So I'm kind of curious to know, you've been years about consistency, but I'm really curious to actually know about your morning routine and how do you win your morning?
Yeah, that's actually very difficult because I'm not great at keeping a nightly schedule. I'm very much a night person, which means it's very hard for me to get up most mornings. I get up when I have meetings. I get up when I have to see people, and that's also why when I realized that was when I started the student organization, and I had trouble going to university to sit at lectures for a whole day. I skipped out a lot on that because I couldn't get myself out of bed, right? Didn't motivate me at all. But the fact of realizing that what motivates me most of all is talking to people, is interacting with them, is inspiring them and stuff. That helps me get out of bed in the morning. And when I know that, I can just design a lot of things so that I have that organized to be early. If I say that I have a meeting at 9 o'clock to do that, to meet some people, to host a talk or something, then I get up with a smile. I'm like, oh, I'm excited because I have to go do this thing. And so I sort of hack myself in that way by looking for which days have been easy to get up and then do that more, right? Figure out why was that easy, and then just exploit it as much as possible.
Absolutely. Oh my God. That's so amazing. And again, for everyone out there who've been listening to this, and everyone has this internal wish or the grit to actually on the internet, like everyone to create has a choice to make a footprint of their work on the internet, right? They need to have a footprint in the internet about their work, specifically their passion and their things, right? First, maybe they create the print of their content creation, right? They create a print on the internet related to everything about the content, and they scale it up ahead with the consistency, right? You create a footprint on the internet and then you scale it up with a bit of consistency every single day, and that's how you work on, right? But if that content is really not making the cut to the others, it's a bit disappointing, right? And the cycle can be seen everywhere and very often in blogging specifically and video making everywhere, right? If we do consistently, but if we don't feel it's not making the cut, then it may discourage you and it puts you down for a lot of time, right? So how could someone create blogs or videos in such a way that could be a bit popular? When I say a bit popular, it would be full of a legit and a useful content to others. And what sort of things that you could add in the blogs or videos that could grab their attention?
Yeah, so if I had an algorithm for how to go viral, I would definitely use it myself as much as possible. But I think a lot of people expect to start out being famous on the internet, right? They write something, they think it's a brilliant idea, and we all think our ideas are brilliant. They're our brainchilds. And then you write it up and it looks good and you send it out and it just doesn't get the traction that you want. And it can be super disappointing and disheartening. But I think what most people forget is that things just take a lot of time. When I went into streaming, I was with the mindset that this is going to be a 4-year investment. I'll do this for 4 years with basically very few viewers. And if it's still not getting what I wanted to, then I'll stop it by then, right? I set a deadline for when do I need to reevaluate this decision. And then it's just an investment. It's an objective thing that I've decided to do now. And I'm committed to doing that. The same with the blog. I was like, okay, what's the numbers I want out of this? What are the traction? What do I want to put on it? What's my plan? How am I going to achieve all these things? Where's the time going to come from to do this thing, right? Am I committed to dedicating that time? And especially when it has a deadline, you can sort of calculate how much time you're going to have to spend on this thing. And so I think instead of trying to be super brilliant and to be super famous on the internet quickly, I think it's much more about the consistency, as we've talked about, and also about focusing on small things that can be useful. Like, don't try to come up with the next brilliant Einstein level idea. Just write up something that you know that someone else might not know, right? Or in a slightly easier way, or with more pictures, or something like that, right? I have a lot of side-by-side code in my book because the other refactoring books don't have that. And it can make it a little bit easier, probably. Or hopefully, I mean, that's the goal at least. I have a lot of pictures. Every time I do a tutorial on my blog, it's pictures on every step, and stuff like that just makes it so practically applicable that it's easy to share and it's easy to approach. And then, over a long time, that will slowly just grow automatically. If you have useful content, people will find it. No matter how good or how bad, I think, almost, it is, so long as it's useful.
Oh my God, that's beautifully said. Again, I mean, that literally made a lot of impact. But in the same way, when you spoke about it, a few things made me to ask you this question. So, when we are being consistent and we committed to do the same work for the times, unless we fulfill or unless we keep doing it for quite a bit longer time, so finding new content is one of the most challenging things, I believe. So you need to find that a true content that really helps others, right? You just don't want to write content because you wanted to do that today, right? You wanted to write the content because it's helping others and you're on a way, you're being consistent, right? But finding such content, like, I feel really hard, really tough. But I want to know, like, how do you do that? Like, what is your approach on finding a useful content, a impactful content, and that help others and helps you to be consistent and learning a lot?
So there in a lot of things, I do some technical reviewing in my company of other people's blog posts, and in a lot of things, when people write up a blog post, there's actually almost always some very useful thing that they mention briefly. Like if it's no matter what it is, it's like, oh, you can do this easily, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that easily. Is that easy? If you know how to do that, just write that up also. Like that's a blog post right there, because I don't know that, right? There are so many things that we just take for granted or think, oh, this is not smart enough. This is not good enough, but it's definitely good enough. There are so many people in the world and we all have problems and none of us are experts in the same thing, right? And if I know how to set up like some build pipeline or something, I can write that up as a blog post that will be useful to some people. Some blog posts are more useful or more widely applicable, and that's fine. Not all of my ideas are great, I'll admit that. I have a kid's workbook for programming that I really love the idea of, but it's one of the things I've decided not to work on. So I've tried open sourcing it, and maybe somebody else will see that and be like, oh, that's a great idea. I can continue that, or I can do this other variation of it, or something like that. And hopefully, that just sparks inspiration that then I can look at and get inspired from. And just listening to the community, trying to interact with people and seeing, following some people on Twitter that you think are interesting and seeing what are their current interests, what are the trends like, where are people looking? Is there something I can learn, or is there something I can teach? And even if you sit down and go through a tutorial, right, usually I'll get inspired to be like, okay, from this tutorial I learned this thing, maybe I can write up something else that's sort of related to that or expands upon it or does it in another context, something like that. Just including my sort of experiences and the way that I've gotten to where I am.
Awesome. And when you try doing the whole things in the entire journey, right? When you keep doing that with such kind of a precious mindset, when you keep on doing the things that help others in a consistent manner, but I think looking it from other perspective, I believe there is a lot of criticism and judgmental, right? There's a lot of judgmental thing comes up and a lot of criticism bashes up. They are just not other people thoughts. They are also questions for us, right? We question ourselves. We don't just ignore them. Even we try to, it becomes a question for us. Am I doing a really great job? Am I doing an efficient thing that really helping others? Or it's just a waste of time, right? We get a lot of criticism, which turns to be a judgmental statement, which eventually turns into questions our own self, right? So is there any way that you actually tackle with, because you've been writing a lot of blogs, you've being so consistent for past years, and I think you already face it, such a kind of situations, we're being judged and we're being, questioned and we're being wrongly negotiated and any other things. I didn't get the terms perfectly, but so do you have any kind of advice for people out there who's just like me having this similar situations?
Dealing with feedback and dealing with, everything from trolls and just negative sort of all of these negative emotions that come with that is really, really difficult. And I won't say it isn't. And it's also one of the reasons I would say if you're considering writing a book or something, or being a public person on the internet, you should really look at yourself and see, can I handle all of the things that are going to come with this? Because there is a lot of risk, at least, involved with that. I've been super lucky. I haven't had a lot of negative feedback, or actually I've had no trolls or anything like that. And I think part of that is because it comes out in my reading, hopefully, that I'm doing it to help the reader. Like all of the things I'm doing is for the reader's sake, and it's to help someone else. And I think it's easier to attack someone who, as I say, like to listen to their own voice if you're doing it for yourself or to show off, then it's very easy to attack you. But if you can genuinely feel that these people are trying to help other people, I think it grows a better sort of community that's more, receptive to sort of things. And I'm also very quick to admit when I don't know something about something. That also helps protect me from, not saying something outrageous that I don't know anything about, because that just opens everything up to, a lot of criticism. But I'm quick to say when I know something and when I don't know something, and then I try to keep them separate. And I always try to listen before I also reply, because if I don't know where the other person is coming from, there's no point in even having a discussion or anything. There is a great quote in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that says, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still." And so you need to listen, and you need to start from where the people are before you can move them at all. So I try to go have that mindset when I start something.
Yeah, totally. And in the meantime, like when we try to deal with that with such as optimic mindset, like it's kind of very challenging to actually find which feedback is actually helpful and which feedback is not. Right? So because choosing things and putting into the execution for a better thing, for our own self, right? It becomes, if we take the feedback and put into the execution and make it better, it helps a lot of others and it helps you first, right? But taking that negative feedback, which may not be true or not, may not be authentic, and putting it into the execution may actually fail you, may actually trouble you a lot, right? But here the challenging thing is, like, how do you find that? How do you find whether a feedback is helpful or it's not? Like, how do you segregate it, classify them, and put into the execution?
So Manning has helped me a lot here. I've talked with my editors about how to deal with feedback, because I get a lot of feedback, both on the forum of the book and through the review process that they have. What I found to be most useful was an advice I got that said, well, look whether they're confused or just disagree. Right? Because some people can disagree a lot, like we can disagree about reasonable points, and that's fine. I'm not saying that my rules are the one and only way to get good code. I'm specifically not saying that. I'm just saying it's a useful teaching technique. And again, the keyword being useful, not necessarily for everyone, but for a lot of people, I think it'll be useful. And so I look for whether this is a genuine question that they want answered. Is this something that they feel like I should have answered or could have answered or think is missing? And if that's the case, is there a way for me to reasonably answer that question in the book, right? Every time I get a question, I don't think about how to answer it directly. I think about how can I make the text make sure that question doesn't come up again. And so I look for honest questions, I would call them. Questions that aren't rhetorical, questions that aren't meant to be mean, I think are always valid and should always be respected and dealt with in that way.
Wow, that's good. I mean, and also in the same way, like when you previously mentioned about you're going to continuously and consistently stream that, right? Stream your work at a certain day, at a certain time, right? For people who are out there who are unaware of your streams, maybe they are missing till now. So I hope they won't from now. So I want to know, like, what do you stream specifically about, and how often you stream, and what sort of things you share when you stream?
I stream 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there are two different themed streams. On Thursdays, I stream something where I start from scratch and just explore a new technology, a new language, something fun, a little project, whatever it is. And on Tuesdays, then we have a longer running project that we work for multiple weeks and try to figure out or make something that's a little more substantial. That sort of motivates a lot of other challenges that are interesting, like testing, for instance, is mostly on Tuesdays, because if you're doing something for 3 hours, it's unlikely that you're going to need tests. But if you're doing something for weeks, then you're going to need tests because you're going to forget. And so it's two different styles of programming, and I try to make them both fun and self-contained. I do nothing off stream. You see the whole process, and you see me Googling, and you see me debugging and refactoring, and you see all of that stuff. So it's just having another person coding right next to you twice a week. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. And in the same way, like I knew that you've been into the code and into the computers from the younger age, right? So I'm from India, so I see a lot of hype in India and across the world about letting kids to learn code, right? And making them to join online courses to code and program any apps, right? Just for fun. They want to learn, right? And I knew that starting code from very engaged and then where it's very rare and also challenging to make a clear intuition about the code, right? So would you actually recommend parents or people who have been taking care of kids to let the kids to learn code?
Definitely. I learned it when I was 7, and it's been very, my dad did it in a very non-intrusive way. It wasn't like something he expected me to do or to be good at or anything. He just thought it was fun, so he let me sit next to him, and sometimes I had the keyboard, I would code some little thing or whatever. And then I got distracted. I did some other things for a few years, but then I came back to it, and then I did some other things again, and then I came back to it. And that stayed with me. It helped me structure my thoughts from a really early age. So now when I see things, when I see processes, I can structure them as code very, very quickly and very intuitively, which I don't think is common for many programmers, but a lot of things just seem to naturally lend themselves to code in my head. And I think that's because I started so early. I'm a big fan of the books called Hello Ruby by, I think she's called Linda. She's a Finnish author who wrote children's books about how to start talking about computers as a topic with kids. And half of the book is like this workshop style where how do you describe how you would brush your teeth, right? And then you have to come up with all of the steps that's involved in that. And it's a lot of stuff, right? Did you forget to put toothpaste on? Did you do it before or after you took it to your mouth and stuff like that? So I definitely recommend that people start helping their kids understand structure in that way and thinking structured and, exploring those sort of topics. Whether it's as programming or not is not as important for me. It's most important, I think, that they talk about structure and try to be structured in describing structure and be unambiguous. What does that mean? Because that's a large part of programming.
Yeah, totally. And here, for all the listeners out there who are parents and who actually have kids who are taking care of the things, Chris, can you just explain how those people can actually encourage kids to actually get into code? So if you just mention about how do you actually impress people, or how do you actually get the attention of the kids to let them be fascinated about working on code, right? Because kids are not like they're not just like you just say something, they do, right? They imitate us. When we try doing something, they actually imitate us and they start trying doing something else, right? So what would be your thought process and what would be your advice for people who are having kids so that they encourage us, somehow they motivate and somehow they attract their kids to come on to work on code?
I would start with something that's very that engages the parent. I think, as you say, the kids copy the parent. And I think if the parent is passionate about this stuff and thinks it's fun, then that's going to, transfer to the kid also. Like, as I said, I started doing it with my dad, and it was because he thought it was fun. He was coding a Pac-Man game sometimes. And I was like, that sounds fun. Can I just sit next to you? And it was because it was my dad, right? That's the only reason I got into this whole thing. And I think just that if you're passionate about it, and then do something that gives them success early, right? As I said, with all teaching, just start by something that can be imitated and then repeated, and then you can start making variations. And the fact of I had a friend just tell me about how he and his girlfriend did a project recently. She's not a coder, and they did the Pong game, right? And he just sat her in front of the computer, and she could change some numbers and something would change on the screen. And that started being interesting because he was like, okay, but how can I make this thing change? And she just started messing around like we do when we're programmers. And that, that feels good. I don't think a lot of people who felt that doesn't like that feeling of just, I can change something happens. It feels super important. I can control everything in this tiny little world. And that's fun automatically. So I think just giving people easy, impactful programming exercises is a great way to get started.
Awesome, and that's beautifully said again. So here, Anna, when I was having a flash over the books, I mean the preview of the book of at Manning, you and also from your blogs, you actually term something like technical drag, right? Which is like something that makes the development slower, right? So what are those drags that actually cause the development process delayed? So this would be our end question, talking all about the code, and we could close off and then move forward.
Yeah. So technical drag encompasses a few different things. We usually have just the word technical debt. And I'm sort of not a fan of that for a lot of reasons. And a lot of other people have also started doing variations of that called technical waste, where if you are actually doing bad architecture with no intention of fixing it, then it's not debt anymore. It's just sabotage, right? It's just bad. It's plain out. You're destroying your code base for no reason. Technical debt I use to mean when I have something in production that's broken and that's very bad, we're losing money right now, I need to fix it. Then you can do some technical debt. You can say, I will not refactor this. I'll just push out the change very quickly. But then immediately after the fire is put out, then I'll go back and fix it, right? Debt sort of implies that you have to pay it back. And in fact, you have to pay it back quickly. But that's not the way a lot of people think about debt in industry. People with economics backgrounds will think, well, what is the interest rate, right? How long can I postpone paying back that debt? And in my head, it should be as short as possible. Like it needs to be within the same iteration. You need to fix that thing. Otherwise, it goes over and becomes more wasteful because it's slowing down everything past that point. That is the interest rate, right? And that's not at the expense only of time, but also of the happiness of your developers, because they can't do their work as well as they would like to anymore. And I think that's super important. So technical drag for me is an umbrella term that just covers all of the things that slows us down at all. It's bad architecture. It's when technical ignorance, right? When there's something that you simply don't know there is a better solution to. And that could be fine. That's not something that I would blame anyone for. It's just something that happens. Sometimes you don't know what the best way to solve something is, or you don't have the best tools or technologies or whatever. So we have, I think I have those categories, like ranging from ignorance and technical waste and technical debt. And then, it's all just under the same umbrella of technical drag, which is everything that slows down development, which really is everything that's static. Like once you've written something down, it is harder to change. So it's also about, so I have this thing in the book that I love deleting code. And I do love deleting code also in real life, because code slows us down. The more we have, the more we need to maintain, the more we need to consider, the harder it is to make changes. All of these things, like code is really hard to carry around. So just the less of it you have, the better. So I also consider code technical drag, technically.
Awesome. And also, I remember that you also spoke about something like developer games or programmer games, but you shouldn't, right? I hardly remember the blog that you've been. It's quite a long. I read it, but if you just remember any part of it, but I want to hear it from you. Like if you have any pointer sources about the developer or the programmer games, but you shouldn't. I hardly remember that. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah. So it's games programmers play but shouldn't. And it's about all of these things that we really like to do that feel super useful. They feel really important, and so we do that. We tend to get bogged down by them. We tend to focus on them. It's stuff like optimization, as we talked about earlier. People love doing perfectly super optimized, really nice code, and it looks super cool and it feels super cool. But most of the time, the code doesn't need to be super optimized. A lot of times you just need functional code that's quick enough, right? That's not poorly designed deliberately. And so optimization is one of the things I think people get fanatic about but shouldn't. Don't repeat yourself is another one that I talk a lot about in the book also. People tend to look at two lines and they're like, oh, these are both printfs, so I need to somehow extract printf to something that's simpler or something. And it's like, just relax a little bit. Don't get fanatic about these things, right? It's good advice to not repeat yourself. It's good advice to keep the information in your program consistent and simple and centralized in some way. It's bad advice when it starts being don't repeat yourself for the sake of don't repeating yourself, right? when you're just starting to harden all of the structure, even the one that's accidental or even the one that's not necessary, it sort of stops experimentation. And I think that's especially bad, because programming for me is about building knowledge of the underlying domain. Whenever I go to a new customer or a new team, I have to start learning what is it that they work with. How does their world look like? What is the model of the world that they have? Because that's what the code is. That's what all the data represents. It's sort of how their world looks. And when I have to learn something, I learn quicker if I can experiment quickly. And so for a lot of things, for a lot of code that is young, for instance, trying not to duplicate things is really, really destructive, because it slows down your speed of experimentation, which is important in that stage. And so my big point there is that we should be mindful of when duplication sort of supports us and when it hurts us, and then not get them confused and not think that one rule applies to all situations, because that's, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, And yeah, I also have the last, I think I have one more. I can't recall what it is.
That's okay, no issue. So, I mean, so far so good. I mean, I can add a pointer source on the description to actually check out the blog, which actually really helpful for all of the people who've been, striving so hard to write a perfect code or an optimized code, or drawing the code. When I said drawing, it's like, don't repeat yourself and all of that. So, before we hop over and also take it back, so Chris, do you want to share anything to the listeners out there who are actually people who are developers, or actually to people who are striving for consistency, and the people who really wanted to make a better code?
I mean, just embrace continuous improvement. Just get a little bit better all of the time, and just take it slow. Accept that a lot of things take time. Set up deadlines for yourself. Try to be consistent, and try to try to be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. That should make you great.
Wow. Well, I mean, that definitely helps a ton out there for the people. And thank you so much for being here, Chris. It's been an immense pleasure to actually host you and talking all about the consistency, perfection, optimization, and people who strive for the good code and the bad code, and making a differentiation and taking up the feedback, the positive or negative, or a lot of ton of the stuff that you gave us today. And I think this will be definitely helping a lot of people out there who are listening and who could actually thrive from the existing situation and could able to improve 1% a day, at least a bit, and become the best person of their self tomorrow, right? And thank you so much for being here. It's been so amazing conversation with you.
Thanks for having me, Teja. It's been fun.
If you are the one looking forward to adapting machine learning into your career, take a look at our sponsors, Sundog Education, and start free trial with a lot of hands-on activities and exercises. You can practice whatever you have learned. Visit sundog-education.com and you can find all the direct links in the episode notes below. Thank you.